Hello and welcome to How Corporate Renewable Energy Procurement Can Fuel Decarbonization, If Only We Let It. We have a great moderator, great panelist for you today, but I did see that we had a bunch of new faces. I think we had relatively almost 300 people signed up for this, so I'm going to go into a little bit of what NARUC does and what our department does at CPI as well. So NARUC is a nonprofit that we were founded in 1889. We have our members are the state regulatory commissions, all 50 states, and our regulatory commissions regulate electricity, natural gas, telecom, and water utilities. And just a little bit about what our department does. So this is Dominic Liberatore. I'm with the Center for Partnerships and Innovation. Danielle Sass-Burnett is also on the line here, and we are a grant-funded team. We provide technical assistance to our members. We try to identify emerging challenges for our commissions and direct them to the correct expertise and strategies to get over those. We build relationships and develop a ton of resources and trainings. A lot of the resources you can find on our website, www.naruc.org/CPI, and then we have the 4 topical areas. Although those are very broad, we have a lot of other bullets under that. So be sure to check out our website. There's a ton of resources that could be valuable to you. In terms of webinar logistics, like I said, we will be recording. Well, I didn't say this. We will be recording the webinar, and it will be posted on NARUC's webpage, the one I just mentioned. So every webinar is recorded there, and we will. They are available for you after this. Since we have around 300 people here, everyone is in listen mode only, and the way we're going to conduct questions is essentially you just use the question box, and those will come in, and we will send them to our moderator. All right. And now I will hand it over to our moderator, Commissioner Ann Rendell. Commissioner Rendell was appointed to serve as Commissioner of the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission by Governor Inslee in December of 2014. She currently serves as Chair of the Electricity Committee and member of the Critical Infrastructure Committee for the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, US, and serves on NARUC's Board of Directors. We have a great panelist today. We have a great list of panelists today, and I can't wait. So, Commissioner Rendell, can you take over?
Happily, Dominic, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this NARUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation webinar. The focus of this webinar is looking to the next level of corporate procurement models for meeting the ambitious goals that commercial and industrial customers and states and utilities have set for decarbonization. Customers, companies, and states have so far pursued corporate procurement mostly using RECs to meet their renewable energy goals. And as C&I customers, states and utilities are focusing on ensuring that they're not just purchasing renewable energy, but making sure clean and non-emitting energy is actually powering their businesses and homes, there's a need to look differently at renewable energy acquisitions. So as noted in this abstract, the abstract for this webinar, different policy and market structures constrain options available to C&I customers to buy the renewable energy they want across markets in the U.S. For example, RPS expansions have the potential to green the grid for all customers, but do not necessarily enable C&I customers to go beyond state-established renewable energy targets. The 4 speakers participating today are going to discuss existing programs, regulatory barriers to expanding C&I purchasing, and opportunities to resolve these challenges. Our speakers today are Carrie Zalewski, who was appointed Chairman of the Illinois Commerce Commission on April 15, 2019 by Governor J.B. Pritzker to a 5-year term. Chair Zalewski is both a lawyer and an engineer by training. Prior to her service at the Illinois Commerce Commission, Chair Zalewski was a member of the Illinois Pollution Control Board. Before serving on the Illinois Pollution Control Board, she was Assistant Chief Counsel for the Illinois Department of Transportation, and prior to her state service, Chair Zalewski worked in private practice. Bryn Baker is the Director of the Policy Innovation Program for the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance, or REBA, a community of energy buyers accelerating the zero carbon energy future. Bryn leads REBA's work to influence policy, to create and expand options that allow customers to accelerate their renewable energy procurement while greening the grid, and to expand and improve organized wholesale markets that facilitate renewable energy integration, increase customer options, and reduce costs. Continuing our theme of accomplished women in STEM, Bryn has an undergraduate degree in biology and a master's degree in environmental policy. Jeff Riles, who leads energy market development initiatives for the Global Infrastructure Group at Google, is primarily focused on wholesale energy market design, focusing on ensuring flexible, cost-effective, and customer-centric models. Prior to Google, Jeff worked as a senior director at Enel Green Power and as an energy attorney working on a number of transactional and regulatory matters. Jeff holds a law degree from the University of Oklahoma and a bachelor's degree from Oklahoma City University, and is a frequent lecturer on energy regulatory policy, including most recently at the Georgetown Law Center, Harvard University, and the George Washington Law School. And finally, Mariah Kennedy is the head of data center energy strategy for Microsoft, where she leads strategic analysis on energy policy and regulations that impact Microsoft's ability to secure clean, affordable energy supply to data centers with exceptional reliability and to meet Microsoft's sustainability targets. Mariah is also a lawyer by training and, like me, has an undergraduate degree in anthropology. Prior to joining Microsoft, Mariah taught energy law and policy at Seattle University School of Law and served in multiple roles at Puget Sound Energy, the largest investor-owned electric utility in Washington state, including managing teams assisting with state, regional, and federal energy regulations and policy, and assisting the company in its transition to its first organized energy market, now the Western Energy Imbalance Market. As an attorney, Mariah practiced law at K&L Gates in Seattle, Washington. So we're going to begin with Bryn Baker. And Bryn, if you're ready, let's take it away.
Great, thank you so much. And a big thank you to NARUC for the invitation to join today and for the opportunity to talk about unlocking corporate renewable energy procurement. So next slide. I am going to try to cram a lot in 10 minutes. So the roadmap is going to be, I'm going to very briefly touch on who REBA is and talk a bit about some of the trends happening within corporate renewables procurement and how that's shaping both their needs and their impact on the market. And then the real meat of this is going to be about the renewable energy policy pathways analysis that we did on optimizing pathways for corporates and other customers to get access to the renewables that they need and want. And talk really briefly about why our buyer community has landed on the importance of wholesale markets to unlock more progress towards a clean energy economy. So next slide, digging in. REBA represents a community of over 120 energy buyers alongside clean energy providers, service providers, NGOs, all working toward a common vision of a resilient zero carbon energy system where every organization has a viable, expedient, and cost-effective pathway to renewable energy, alongside a goal to deploy about 60 gigawatts of new renewables by 2025, and really growing the buyer participation in the market. So next slide. Together, this is just going to be a quick flash of logos, but together our members represent 3.8 trillion in revenues combined, ranging, obviously you can see here, from some of the biggest companies in the US to much smaller energy buyers. And next slide, these buyers are having a significant impact in the market. There's really been a definitive upswing over the last 5 years. You can see here where these buyers have now collectively deployed nearly 30 gigawatts of new renewables. The blue line is the cumulative total in gigawatts, and the orange bars are the annual totals. And in fact, last year, the 9.4 gigawatts of announced deals from corporates, these are large-scale offsite deals, equaled about 80% of the total renewable capacity that was added in the US last year. So this is not niche customer demand. And the buyer demand has remained strong throughout the pandemic. And in fact, we've found that around 3/4 of buyers are saying they're staying the course or even doubling down on their commitments in this environment because the need to meet them isn't going away. And in terms of forward demand, Wood Mackenzie estimates that from Fortune 1000 companies alone, they need about 85 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. So this presents a significant economic opportunity to capture. If you go to the next slide, where are these companies doing these deals? The shorter answer is where they can. Texas leads with the most deals, followed by states like Virginia, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Illinois. And a key feature of all of these states is that they have access to a regional electricity market run by a regional transmission organization or RTO, because that provides the platform for executing a contract for renewable energy at scale, which is what these buyers need. And in fact, over 80% of the corporate offsite deals to date have been through wholesale markets. The non-PPA deals that you see on this map are either bilateral deals with utilities or through utility green tariffs. But clearly the market to date has been dominated by these virtual PPAs, which are about matching annual renewable production to annual corporate consumption. And the big trend that you're going to hear from a couple of the corporate buyers more directly on that's shifting the goalposts is that leading companies are now transitioning from seeking 100% renewable energy, which of course itself is a very ambitious goalpost, to thinking about committing and committing to 100% zero carbon energy. And increasingly, that's looking at it around the clock, where they are actually consuming it. So that means that what customers are increasingly looking for is not just about matching RECs to annual consumption, but now committing to zero carbon and beyond. And I'm going to let Mariah and Jeff really pick up on that theme and dig into the pathway study on the next slide. Because I think what that really presents us with, next slide, is the question of how do we unlock and unleash all this demand by customers across the country. So the REBA Institute, an affiliate of REBA, teamed up with the Brattle Group, who did the analysis, which was released last May, to look at the policy pathways that would most expand options for customer procurement. Next slide. The study looked at 3 pathways between now and 2030 that estimated the technical potential for impacting customers' renewable energy access, including modest RPS increases in states of about 10 to 15%, utility subscription programs for renewable energy, where these programs were scaled to the size of natural fossil retirements, and that was done as a way to estimate maximum program size without creating stranded costs. And then third, introducing supply choice options for C&I customers. So next slide. The study looked at the impacts of those 3 pathways over the next 10 years in 8 states, representative of different market and regulatory structures. And critically, the results provide technical, not political potential or actual adoption rates along 3 metrics of amount of new capacity added, how many C&I customers were had access to renewable energy or were consuming renewable energy as a result of the pathway, and of course, customer costs. Next slide. So there are 4 key takeaways. The first is that allowing C&I customers the option to choose their suppliers provides the greatest technical potential to lower prices and provide greater access to renewables for C&I customers, potentially up to 100%, and lowering the cost of renewable energy procurement costs by up to 11%. Second is that utilities renewable energy subscription programs provide attractive near-term opportunities to improve access to renewables. And this is particularly the case when utilities replace retiring fossil generation with renewables for C&I to avoid cost shifts. And the costs in these situations ranged from possible savings, depending on how it's structured, to a slight premium. And then third, the moderate RPS expansions have really important potential to green the grid for all customers, which is a really important outcome. But as was said in the intro, in most cases, that doesn't directly provide procurement options for C&I customers that want to go beyond or move faster than these state established targets. So alone, RPSs are not sufficient to help customers drive the clean energy transition or meet their own goals on an accelerated timeline. But the real core finding from this is that all of these policies play a role. There is no one single pathway that wins out. There's no silver bullet and no surprise. It's really about the combination of these things playing a different role. But fourth, Brattle found that having access to organized wholesale markets, or RTOs, make any of these pathways more cost effective. And the evidence shows that wholesale markets are foundational to customer renewable energy access and greening the grid overall for all customers, because they create access to customer options by giving buyers a market to clear a PPA in, but also that it's well established that they provide billions in customer savings by running markets efficiently. And the existence of a market allows for greater renewables integration, including by facilitating the balancing of variable renewable resources over a wider region. And in fact, we see that 80% of the variable renewables to date have been deployed in states with an RTO. If you go to the next slide. This is a summary of the detailed findings, which I'm not going to go through today. You can find it on the REBA Institute website. But again, it's really pointing to the fact that there's a distinct role for each of these pathways, and it's really about a combination of all of them. So then if you go to the next slide, moving from study to practice, how does this give us a framework for unlocking customers' ability to access the kind of energy that they want? And so I'm going to go through a couple of maps. When you look at the role of state policies like RPS or clean energy standards, this is a map of where states are setting ambitious goals to decarbonize the grid for all customers, plus the service territories of utilities that have aspirationally committed to 80 to 100% decarbonization. So this is effectively where the grid is likely to get greener for all customers. But since the timelines for many of these goals are 2045 or 2050, and most corporate commitments to clean energy are well ahead of that timeline, you still need a strategy to allow customers that want to move faster to do so. So if you go to the next slide, if you start by looking at green tariffs as a way to do that, this is where utilities have green tariff offerings that are currently being used by C&I customers. There's a lot less coverage. There are about 14 tariffs being used by C&I customers around the country currently. And there may be a couple of states that aren't colored in on this map because it hasn't been updated since May, but our utility green tariff tracker update is coming out in January. If you go to the next slide, when you look at the map combining where C&I customers can choose renewable energy via a green tariff, which is the bright blue, plus states that are already restructured with supply choice, that's the dark blue, plus where there are organized wholesale markets in the sort of bluish gray, this creates the overlay where effectively customers have a route to choose renewable energy or execute a contract to buy it. If you go to the next slide, really when you put all this together, combining where the grid is greening via state or utility commitments with where customers have some degree of ability to opt into or choose renewable, it's clear once again that you need a combination of options to really get at the crux of the opportunity, which is a menu of ways to unlock customer demand for renewable energy. Effectively, it's about both raising the floor with state and utility commitments to green the grid, and about lifting the ceiling with market approaches and purchasing options that attract and allow customers to bring about the bigger economic opportunity here, which is about allowing buyers that have these aggressive targets to purchase and therefore install more renewable energy that brings accelerated jobs, investment, and tax base. So it's really about creating a variety of pathways to green the grid and allowing customers to move further faster. And then a final note on the next slide, on wholesale markets as an enabler of the clean energy transition overall. Again, in the pathways analysis, Brattle found that an underlying wholesale market made any of these pathways cheaper, and that the vast majority of these transactions to date have happened here. So buyers have released a set of wholesale market design principles about a month ago to start to weigh in on the issue of market design and advancing the call for ultimately getting to a place where wholesale markets are operating in every region of the country to enable a faster, cheaper, and more customer-centric transition to clean energy. So with that, I have put enough on the table. So we have a lot to dig into there. Thank you.
Thank you. Just looking for my end of mute button. So a couple of questions came in, Bryn, and I'm just going to see if you can. So the first question was about one of the first maps. Are the North Carolina deals attributed to RTO ISO access, or are they more direct energy?
Good question. It's a little bit of a mix. Most of the, I'd have to go back and look at the exact data. Most of the volume is through the small part of PJM territory, but there are a couple of green tariff deals in North Carolina as well.
Okay. And then another question, they referenced the fourth map. I think that's when you combined everything all together. I don't know, Dominic, if you can go back to that map. The questioner wanted to know if, there we go, if the summary of the coverage is that is, okay, am I right that it's the summary of coverage that is at our potential if we employ all of these strategies? And what is the cumulative capacity represented on this map? Do you have a sense of that?
So good question. This is actually not mapping gigawatts of either installation or potential. It's actually really mapping the pathways themselves and the overlapping pathways of strategies that are greening the grid for all customers, plus ways where customers have the ability to opt into more renewables. So really the takeaway from this map is that to try to really fill in as much gray space on the map, it's going to be about instituting a variety of pathways. And I think customers are honing in on not just filling in the holes in the map, but also improving options where there is color, because a lot of this is also about optimizing the options available. As we talked a little bit about, there's not a lot of coverage when you look just at the green tariffs that have been used. So that alone means that there's a lot of work to be done and collaboration opportunities to continue to expand the footprint of these options.
Okay, thank you, Bryn. So now we're going to turn to Jeff Riles, and Jeff, you're up.
Great, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Why don't we just go ahead and jump in there in the interest of time? So if we can just go ahead and jump to the next slide. So really excited to be here on behalf of the Google team, and really wanted to kind of just lay out why energy is important to us at Google. So as one of the previous slides shows, a lot of our products that we're using today across our platform at Google have just about 1 billion users. So Gmail, G Suite, all of those different products, Maps, YouTube, Drive, Cloud, we're seeing a real significant uptick in our utilization of our products. And all of those products run on our data centers. And so what we've really seen over the last several years is that the utilization from our users is really fueling the growth of our business. And so what this slide here is really meant to just describe at a very high level is that demand for our services is growing every single year, and it's driving a continued growth in our energy use. So in 2019, our total alphabet global electricity use was just over 12 terawatt hours, and this is expected to keep rising. And so from a business perspective, the stakes to our business are incredibly high. Energy is the biggest cost of operating Google's infrastructure, with a price tag of hundreds of millions of dollars per year, and that's continuing to grow. So why don't we go to the next slide? Sometimes when you think about our data center facilities, it can be hard to convey sort of the massive scale that they have. And so actually, why don't we jump one more slide ahead? If you don't mind. One more. Yep, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. So it can sometimes be hard to convey the massive size and scale of our data center facilities. And so if you think about how this all works, they are truly significant and amazing facilities. So this data center is actually located in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It's actually the home of our largest data center facility in our global portfolio. This is the size of about 235 football fields, to try to give you a sense of the scale and its size. If all of the servers that were located in this data center facility were vertically stacked, it would actually stand taller than Mount Everest. So just to give you a sense of that size. So it really covers more than 300 acres of land. So if you walk around that whole facility, it's actually about a 2.75-mile hike, right? The point here is it's massive, it's big, and it consumes a lot of energy and a lot of power. So why don't we go to the next slide? And so if we're thinking about why energy is important to us, every second, our data center facilities, they're filled with those servers, that networking equipment, all of the other computing infrastructure, all of that together is being utilized to perform a myriad of computing tasks required to serve our 1 billion product users. So reliable electricity supply is the fuel that enables us to deliver those Google search results, for people to click on their YouTube video plays, to use our Google Cloud Platform services, and much more without interruption. So really, if you think about it, energy and power is what makes Google run. So why don't we jump to the next slide? Just recently, in the past in the last month, you may have noticed an announcement from our CEO, Sundar Pichai, where we announced that by 2030, we intend to source carbon-free power for our data center facilities around the clock. So not just when the sun is available or when the wind is blowing, but 24/7. And so the key aim here is going to be around carbon reduction rather than just low-cost energy. So there's clearly an overlap here about how we think about our clear long-term synergies between 24/7 carbon-free energy and low cost. But today we're going to look through a little bit of that as we go to the next slide. So let's jump ahead to the next slide. So 24/7 carbon-free energy today represents the final and the most challenging step in our clean energy journey at Google. So back in 2007, we started this journey by going carbon neutral, setting a standard that a lot of other folks have since adopted. And this was a first step to addressing our operational emissions. About a decade later, with new tools at our disposal, we took another leap forward by becoming the first major company to match 100% of our annual electricity consumption with renewable sources. And today, Google is the world's largest corporate purchaser of clean energy. All told, around the world, we bought more than 5.5 gigawatts of new wind and solar to communities from South Dakota all the way to Taiwan. And now we're building on what we've learned over those last 2 decades to help create what is the most exciting, I think, and really challenging part of our journey. And it's the most ambitious phase of that journey, which is, again, by 2030, we intend to run on carbon-free energy everywhere at all times. Let's jump to the next slide. So how does 24/7 carbon-free energy differ from 100% renewable energy? What you see on this slide is an energy profile for a hypothetical data center that, again, provides that sort of instructive example. So over the course of the year, you can see represented here from January 1st on the left, December 31st on the right. We might buy enough renewable energy, represented by those green spikes that you see, to match 100% of our annual electricity use with renewable power. But as we all know, wind and solar are variable. So even though we buy as much total renewable electricity as we use, an hour where the wind speeds aren't there or the sunshine fades, our data center then relies on carbon-based resources like coal and gas. So 24/7 carbon-free energy means that we want to fill in the gaps in a carbon-free energy supply for all of our facilities worldwide. Let's jump to the next slide, please. So as we said about going down this journey, we did some sort of analysis. Where do we stand relative to our 24/7 carbon-free energy goal? So in 2019, we actually learned that on an hourly basis, 61% of our global electricity use across all of our data center facilities was matched with regional carbon-free sources. However, these global averages mask significant differences both day to day and across sites, as you can see across this slide. The blue numbers on this map show average carbon-free energy matching at each of our data centers in 2019. So just using Singapore, most grid electricity comes from natural gas, and our data center is only matched with 3% carbon-free energy. But if you jump to Oklahoma, where I grew up, on the other hand, our purchases of wind power have helped drive carbon-free energy performance at our data center to 96%. Additionally, the clocks on this map show how carbon-free energy matching varied over the course of a single day. So this is looking at September 14th in 2019. So looking at an example down in Chile, you can see how solar power contributed to sort of a higher carbon-free matching during the middle of the day. So let's jump to the next slide. I want to be clear, though, the cost of renewables has come down dramatically and are now often cheaper than fossil fuels on a per megawatt hour basis. In fact, since 2009, solar has come down by 88% and wind by 69%, more than any other technology that we show on this graph. And so as we think about how are we going to achieve this goal, how are we going to get to 24/7, I want to be very clear that our purchasing around renewable energy is going to remain a key component of that strategy. And so that's why the next slide, if we jump there, it's just a reminder that we're super, super proud of being the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. And in 2017, 2018, 2019, we were able to match 100% of our electricity consumption with our operations with purchases of renewable energy. I kind of want to use a different, another example here. So on the next slide, this is a different and maybe more of a closer look at that our sort of electricity use, looking again at our data center in Iowa, again, the largest data center in our global portfolio. You can see there sort of even more granular detail, sort of how this works and sort of what it is that we're trying to solve for. So you look and see midnight, morning, noon, afternoon, evening represented on the graph again, an annual look. And you can kind of see if you kind of look through where all those wind purchases and all of those wind sort of contracts that we've signed and worked with, you can see how they begin filling in against that sort of darker band, which would represent more of the carbon-intensive generation versus the carbon-free energy represented in green. And I actually think it's interesting if you look closer to maybe the summertime of that year, is where you see more of that sort of that darker color representing the lack of sort of the access to wind power at that time. And that's pretty normal, right? We sort of see that happen with the wind shape, where the summer months tend to be more difficult to get that sort of supply to match. And so our goal, just thinking about that Iowa example, is to fill in that chart. So another thing I want to talk about too, not only just as we think about how we get to 24/7, is not just the continued proliferation of renewable energy, but on the next slide, I also kind of want to talk a little bit about the technology advancements that we're seeing, particularly not only here at Google, but we know a lot of folks that are thinking about this deeply are able to do these things as well. So we're actually able now, it's because of some new technology that has been developed, to align computing load with carbon-free energy. So this might mean that, let's say, for example, we have a customer on our Google Cloud platform who has a significant job they want to run on our data center facility. We can use our technology to schedule that job to be done at a time when the grid is at its most carbon-free intensity, so that the utilization of our data centers is occurring in a moment when the grid is at its highest in its carbon-free elements. So that's just a piece of technology that we're seeing kind of take shape to sort of allow us to kind of run jobs in moments on the grid when it's got a higher carbon-free energy content. So the next slide too. We've also been working with machine learning So we're actually deploying this technology today in the Southwest Power Pool. We are using our machine learning and the algorithm there across our wind portfolio to sort of do better scheduling of these wind assets into the market. And so to date, we've actually seen that machine learning technology has boosted the value of a wind energy portfolio on that market by about 20% compared to the baseline scenario. And so this is basically saying we're able to kind of better use that technology to better predict when the wind resource will be available and use that technology to sort of schedule and get more value out of our wind assets in that market. Let's jump to the next slide. It's not just those technologies, though, right? It's not just wind and solar. It's a lot. We are really fully focused and bullish on the reality that we've got to look at technologies beyond wind and solar. And so we are going to be working very hard to advance policies, to look at new commercial deals, to work with utilities and other regulators and policymakers on unlocking the value of other technologies that are advanced carbon-free energy technologies. So the next slide kind of lays out our view here as
and
well.
Jeff, you need to
markets.
Jeff, you need to start wrapping up. Sorry.
Yeah, just one. I'll end here on this slide here, which is just simply to say, at Google, we think a big part of this strategy in order to achieve our goal by 24/7 by 2030 is to see competitive power markets expand, and we think they're absolutely essential to our purchasing and provide significant low-cost benefits to consumers. And I'll stop there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff, so much. That was a great presentation, and you did get a couple questions from the audience. And the first one is why would Google not just buy a firm shape from a developer to fill in the gaps when carbon-free energy isn't available relative to load? Is that something that Google is looking at?
It absolutely is. If there is a way to do something like that, that's absolutely something we would consider. Short answer.
Okay, great. And then there was the levelized cost of energy graph, and I don't know if Dominic, you can go back to that slide, how far back it is, but the questioner wanted to know why hydro was not present on that slide, although it was on the slide a few slides ago in terms of options to carbon-free hydro. Is there a reason why hydro is not on the LCOE graph, or that's not limiting what you're intending to purchase, is it?
No, certainly not meaning to limit any of the value, certainly the carbon-free value that hydro provides. Certainly a technology that we would work with. In fact, we do certainly in markets like Oregon and elsewhere.
Right, Washington and Oregon have great hydropower. So one last question. So to be clear, this is from the audience, market access becomes a clear driver for C&I customers because in even regulated states, virtual PPAs would be an option since it's a financial contract for differences, but you need the market access, correct?
There's a lot of values for a market access beyond just a DPPA, right? We think that supply optionality helps. We think access to the market ensures competitive low cost, right? And certainly it's not just the renewable purchasing, but it's making sure that it's done in a way that's competitive and low cost. So it's not just that component, but certainly it's a key element that drives our strategy.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay, so now we're going to move, in the interest of time, we're going to go to Chair Zalewski. Please take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner Randall. Thanks to Danielle and Dominic for the invitation and for NARUC for hosting. I am very pleased and honored to be among the panelists, a very knowledgeable and esteemed panel, Bryn, Mariah, Jeff, and of course, Commissioner Randall. First, I'm going to start by saying these are my thoughts and my thoughts alone and do not necessarily represent that of the Illinois Commerce Commission. Also, I'm going to note that I am going to speak very high level of two open cases before the Commission. I'm just going to mention them by way of example and only talk about that what's in the statute or in the public domain. I'm very excited to be talking about this issue today. States like Illinois, as I imagine a lot of other states, have this as a priority to understand, as it could be a potential for meeting some of the lofty renewable portfolio standards that states like Illinois either have in place or will have in place in the near future. So what I hope to cover today is just to give a snapshot of what's happening in Illinois. I want to talk a little bit about the law that sets our renewable portfolio standard, and then I'm going to talk about the procurement process and the Illinois Commerce Commission's role. I want to mention, too, the ranking in the Corporate Clean Electricity Procurement Index that indicates Illinois as top, which I think is interesting to kind of dive into that a little bit. A couple examples of growing pains, and then things that, looking to the future, of ways that the Commerce Commission and the state in whole can ensure potentially that barriers are removed. So first, the first slide that's up right now, thank you, is it has a picture of the Future Energy Jobs Act, and this is the law that sets Illinois' renewable portfolio standard. Before the law, we did have a portfolio standard, but this expanded it. It was signed into law December 2016, effective 2017. It established ZECs and distributed generation and community solar programs and solar for all. It sets RPS goals, both short and medium and long term. It sets a goal at 25% by 2025. We are currently at 7%, so we certainly have our work cut out for us still. And then through the state procurement process, the state is procuring the credits for the environmental attributes, not the energy or capacity provided. Project developers can sell the energy or capacity into the RTO wholesale market or via a PPA, for example. And FEJA requires, it has different metrics of, for example, 2 million annual RECs from wind and solar, respectively, by the end of 2020, and then it sets higher metrics as the years go on. And I just want to mention how the funding works. So the RECs are procured. The funding for the RECs are actually a line item on customer bills on customers. It says renewable portfolio standard with the amount, and this is on a per kWh fee, which is set by the legislation. And so it's collected from the customer, and the utility holds the money, and then the Illinois Power Agency runs the procurement. The contract, though, is ultimately between the utility and the provider. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about how the ICC, the Illinois Commerce Commission, interacts with this process. And so this graphic just shows how the Illinois Commerce Commission interacts with the procurement process. So this graphic shows how the long-term renewable resources procurement plan, rolls off the tongue, is initiated, first filed by the IPA in the public domain, and there's a stakeholder process of how the procurement is to run, the details, and the ICC reviews and then ultimately approves. And then at the end of the procurement, the final result of the procurement is reviewed by the Illinois Commerce Commission to ensure that the procurement ran according to the plan. And a couple of things I just want to note anecdotally about the RECs. Utility scale RECs in Illinois, wind projects have been receiving between $3 and $5 per REC, and utility scale solar projects has generally been receiving between $4 and $8 per REC, and utility scale under statute is defined as more than 2 megawatts. And then I mentioned the price, and these obviously seem low, but there is indication that they may be rising in the near future. The IPA recently held a utility scale wind procurement that featured no successful bids. So with lower supply, potential supply, prices may rise. And then compare the utility scale prices to our our DG and community solar RECs at $36 to $96 per REC. And this is, an indication by our policymakers in the Capitol to have a value towards the equity value to ensure that everyone has access and the ability to participate in the solar market. Next slide. So there is a retail industry leaders association that puts out this annual corporate clean energy procurement index, and I know that Reba has a lot to do with providing the analysis and the details. So I'm sure Bryn can probably talk a lot more about the index than I can. But it does have Illinois listed as one, which is great. And a couple of things that just in a cursory reading of the index ranks states based on utility purchasing options and market structure and third-party purchasing options and on-site direct deployment options. Some of these themes are sounding familiar and dovetails nicely with Bryn's presentation. And per the index, Illinois ranks highly because it's noted as a restructured state. We have many options for commercial and industrial customers to purchase renewable energy from. Illinois has access to 2 RTOs, PJM and MISO, and C&I customers can freely enter into PPAs. I also note that Illinois ranks high on interconnection standards and net metering, as the index takes a deep look at the state's standards for interconnection and net metering as a consideration of how it should be ranked in the index. And I just want to note that some information in the index explains that Illinois has corporate offsite renewable deployment of 1,000 megawatts with commitments up to 1,650 megawatts. Microsoft, who I know Mariah will be speaking from next, for example, has 175 megawatts committed. Next slide. I wanted to talk briefly about an example, I think, to highlight a couple points. This is a picture of Cargill, and Prairie Wolf Solar Project was one of the first procurements. So when FEJA was passed, there was a push to get some RECs online really quickly with timelines legislatively determined. And so Prairie Wolf won the procurement, and they were set to energize. And so first they put their name in the queue at the MISO interconnection queue, and it got there was some log jam. So because of this, the General Assembly actually had to make a change to their legislation to allow for this backlog in MISO. So it was one of those unintended consequences that we may have to think through in the next piece of legislation. And I also want to mention, I mentioned Cargill here as the buyer, because Cargill purchased, this is an instance where Cargill purchased the actual energy to use, but not the RECs. So here, Prairie Wolf had the opportunity to earn value for RECs through the state procurement, but also sell the energy directly to Cargill, which allows for multiple sources of income for a project like Prairie Wolf. Okay, next slide. All right, and I just wanted to hit on, since I mentioned it in the index, I wanted to mention some things that are happening currently in Illinois. The Illinois Commerce Commission has 2 open dockets. One is the value of solar. So this was something that's required by the Illinois Public Utility Act. So once Illinois hits 5% penetration of solar on the grid, the Illinois Commerce Commission is required to open a docket to move from full net metering to the value of solar. And the value of solar will be determined considering statutorily required factors like geographic and time and performance-based benefits of where units are located, for example. So stay tuned for that docket. Also, Illinois, like a lot of other states, are re-examining interconnection rules. Interconnection rules came out of that long-term plan that I referenced earlier. There was observed, there were parties that talked about observed interconnection queue and price uncertainty, and so stakeholders convened meeting workshops this summer to try to come to some consensus, and now have filed and moved towards a rulemaking process. So there may be potential changes to the interconnection regulations. Also, there's a lot of conversation in Illinois about potential new energy legislation. The governor put out his 8 principles for clean energy and renewable Illinois economy. And he puts in there, striving towards working towards 100% renewable. And, it comes full circle to the topic before us today. So to get to a question that was teased in the abstract, our state RPS does not count corporate renewable procurement. And so one thing that may be considered is whether to include the counting to achieve the state goals. And I think with the conversation would likely be a determination of how they're counted, whether they, to ensure there's no double counting or double billing, for example. But these are all to be determined whenever the state legislature has the opportunity to meet again. And so that's all I have for my slides. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chair Zalewski. At this point, we don't have a question, but if folks have questions, paste them in the Q&A and we will ask them at the very end. And so now, thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to Mariah Kennedy. Mariah, you're on.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Randall, and thanks to all the panelists. This is such an interesting discussion, and I'm so thankful to be the final panelist on these important topics. I'm Mariah Kennedy, and I'm the head of Data Center Energy Strategy at Microsoft. And it looks like we only have about 9 minutes left today, and so I might speak very quickly because I think I might have more than 9 minutes of material, but I welcome questions and follow up with anyone on the call here today. When I was asked to speak today, I was really struck with the title, How Corporate Renewable Energy Procurement Can Fuel Decarbonization If We Only Let It. And this is a really catchy title. But as much as corporate renewable energy procurement is an important driver of grid decarbonization, I really don't think there is a single obstacle that if we cleared it, it would open floodgates to a decarbonized grid. We have almost 3,000 utilities serving customers in 50 different states with 36 different green tariff programs in the United States. Some are in PUC jurisdictional areas, some aren't. And at Microsoft, we're located in a mix of service territories in the U.S. And as data center operations are growing, we're available or coming soon in over 30 countries. And we also have ambitious sustainability targets that we must meet across this footprint globally, considering issues like clean energy access, innovation, environmental justice. And currently, these goals must be approached through a variety of pathways, including those pointed out by Bren and the other panelists here today. So I might suggest a revised thesis for today's discussion, maybe asking what utility commissions can do. Decarbonization is a global problem that we can't solve merely by getting out of the way or only letting it. Commissioners can support economic and environmental efficiencies and environmental justice by proactive support. However, I completely understand the complexity and the difficulty in reaching these goals. And even though I'm not going to be able to come up with a panacea or even a gold standard green tariff when we talk through today, I hope to walk through these core areas that are up on the screen. Microsoft's robust and multifaceted engagement in the energy system. And we welcome continued engagement in discussions and developments, such as this one here today, that provide thought leadership and get us closer to that decarbonized grid. And the second is Microsoft's sustainability targets and support for decarbonization of a broader grid for all customers. And finally, some avenues to support economic and environmental efficiencies and a just energy transition, including green and market-based rate tariffs, wholesale market integration, and transparency and environmental justice. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll just walk through quickly here. First, Microsoft is an energy customer, with data centers that will serve our customers, which span large and small businesses, to governments, to hospitals and schools, and we have over 220 data centers. As an energy consumer, Microsoft has a high load factor. We require high reliability that Jeff walked through in regards to Google's data centers as well, and speed to market. And we're also a cost-conscious energy purchaser. The second identity here is as a renewable energy procurer and a demand response provider with ambitious sustainability targets. And I'd like to dive into these a bit more further in the slides, but at a high level, the company has committed to procure 100% of renewable energy to meet its load with renewable energy by 2025. We've been carbon neutral since 2012, and we announced in January 2020 that we will be carbon negative by 2030, and by 2050, removing from the environment all carbon the company has emitted either directly or by electrical consumption since it was founded in 1975. Added to these targets, we announced this summer that Microsoft will have 100% diesel-free backup generation by 2030. And with these targets, Microsoft must be an energy innovator. And we're actively looking for ways that we can move toward clean energy solutions. In addition to procuring renewable energy to meet these targets, we're piloting hydrogen fuel cells for use as backup energy, and we're working with battery solutions that can provide important assistance to the grid. So third and finally, Microsoft is a technology company and a technology solutions provider, and we assist energy companies and others with a platform on which they can innovate. So with these three identities, Microsoft is an engaged participant in conversations around energy as a consumer, a producer, and a technology solutions provider. We approach the grid and energy issues with a rounded interest in reliability, cost, and sustainability, and we're constantly looking for innovative ways to find economic and environmental efficiencies on the grid. So if we move to the next slide, I mentioned Microsoft has increased sustainability commitments this year, and that's spurring innovation and commitments to clean energy. One large change in Microsoft's sustainability commitments that occurred just in January was the way we calculate our total emissions. And now as a company, we also include Scope 3. Scope 3 emissions are indirect emissions that must be accounted for across the entire supply chain, including the electricity customers of our products may consume when using our products. Microsoft expects to emit 16 million metric tons of carbon this year, and of this total, 12 million tons fall in this newly incorporated Scope 3. So if you look on the next slide, how do we get there? Microsoft has recognized in January, in our January announcement around these issues, that this is a moonshot. To get there, we have to be proactive. We have to take a comprehensive approach and embrace many opportunities to make carbon reductions. Now on this panel, we're focusing on how state commissions assist in opening up renewable procurement for corporations like Microsoft. And I think it's important in that conversation to continue to keep our eye on the ultimate goal of carbon reductions that consider broader implications and all customers, just as Microsoft targets have done. So if you move to the next slide, this isn't to discount the importance of corporate renewable procurement. The quantity of demand for renewables created by corporate buyers is having a large global impact, and Bren went through this earlier. Bloomberg announced in January 2020 that there's over 19 gigawatts of renewables that were procured by corporations just in 2019. And tech companies like Microsoft and Google on this panel are some of the largest supporters. This is impactful and important to the environment and the economy. So what are the avenues for renewable procurement that commissioners can support to continue to encourage this momentum? While green tariffs are popular, Bren went over the different models for green tariffs earlier, and we have seen an increase in development of green tariffs in recent years. I think now there are programs in over a third of the states. So the truth is there's no one size fits all. Each utility has its own set of stakeholders and concerns around how best to structure a tariff while protecting ratepayers and resources. And Microsoft is open to exploring different structures for renewable procurement and opening the market for other buyers, both large and small. In addition to green tariffs, another possible structure is to procure energy on a market-based rate from the utility, as in APS's XHLF tariff, or to open competitive procurement like Dominion Energy's Schedule MBR. And while I would not call out any tariff as ideal, and we could spend a lot of time going through costs and benefits on different approaches, I would just raise at a high level that programs can enable renewable procurement from a broader set of providers and encourage competitive and competition and innovation. So though these two opportunities, green tariffs and market-based rates, provide one avenue for renewable procurement, meaningful carbon reductions require multiple levers and a multifaceted approach. So how can we go beyond avenues like PPAs and green tariffs to innovate? Could we have an effective open clean energy market, like a forward clean energy market? Reba pointed out the importance of wholesale markets to enabling renewables, and I would echo that point. In fact, I have several more bullets that echo that point. But I realize we only have 1 minute left. So I just highlight that markets are extremely important for economic and environmental efficiencies and transparency of data. We're interested in the carbon content of the grid mix, and we're innovating in this area. If you want to hear more about Microsoft's work with Vattenfall in this area around 24/7, I highly recommend looking at our blog. And I would also, I would be remiss to end without mentioning environmental justice. We recently did a deal with Soul Systems for 500 megawatts of renewable energy that's going to communities that are disproportionately affected by climate change. And anything that we can do in the regulatory context to be mindful and supportive of the environmental justice aspects of what we do in this energy transition is important. So with that, I look forward to continuing to work on innovative ways to drive carbon reductions, and thanks so much for everybody's time.
Thank you so much, Mariah, and I'm sorry you had to compress your comments, but I think you did phenomenally. So I'm looking at the questions here. I think there's a question for you and Jeff, whether both Microsoft or Google could entertain procurement structures where portions of the procured renewable energy contracts are set aside for smaller buyers, or support aggregation for smaller corporates who maybe don't have the same purchasing power and sterling credit as your two companies. So maybe we start with you, Mariah, and then with Jeff. I think we can go over a few more minutes.
Okay, great. And so just if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's around how can we support smaller procurers of renewable energy in our construct. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. And the question was about whether portions of procured renewable energy contracts can be set aside for smaller buyers or support aggregation for smaller corporates.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I think that, at Microsoft, our renewable team takes a portfolio approach, kind of looking across our global portfolio and looking at different ways in which we can find innovative solutions in order to procure renewables. And we have a variety of different models that we use. And one thing that's really emphasized internally is the ability to access those models by both large and small buyers, and really opening it up to all customers. And I think one of the things I would highlight about Microsoft and our announcements around sustainability is that, even our own announcements that came out in January, we're reliant on that reduction of scope 2 emissions across the grid. And we're looking at what the emissions are of our customers as well. So when we're talking to utilities, we're really interested in the ability to open things up, like what you just mentioned, Commissioner Rendall, having the opportunity for some portion of it to be to all different buyers, and in fact, not just corporations, but all customers, really. And there are a variety of ways to do that, and that we could talk through.
And I'll just quickly add, this is Bryn, I think that's been done in a number of examples, but I think this is a space where even green tariffs could really explore and develop quite a bit of ways that there can be some anchor companies, but it really opens up opportunities for a lot of smaller customers. But there's already a lot of good case studies on this.
Thanks. I don't know, Jeff, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't have much to add.
Go ahead.
I just support for what Mariah and certainly what Bryn just said. I think I think we find ourselves in this moment where we absolutely see value, and we're talking not just about a purchasing together, but like just opening up market access. It's for every user. And I just couldn't agree more with what Mariah said. So nothing more to add than exactly agree with what she said.
Thank you. So there is another question, but before that, I just wanted to make a brief announcement that NARUC is happy to announce that the National Renewable Energy Lab is developing a free voluntary renewable electricity and storage procurement analysis tool, and it's designed to help corporations identify and compare procurement options across their facilities. So if you're interested in helping NREL shape the tool, reach out to Jeff Cook at jeff.cook@nrel.gov for more information. Okay, and we have one other question. I know we're running over time. for all of the panelists, which of the states that presently have no activity, as shown on the REBA map that Bryn showed earlier, which of these states do panelists feel have the most immediate potential for procurement activity to begin?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I think it's hard to say that there's a single state. I think what the real takeaway, hopefully, from this conversation is that buyers are interested in buying renewable energy wherever they are. That's really the bigger trend that's happening here. Is it's less about buying it where you can and matching it to your consumption. It's that we need to green the grid everywhere. And some of what we're trying to signal, though, are some of the tools for doing that, both ways that green the grid for all customers and allow those like Microsoft and Google and many others to go further faster, and the tools to opt into doing that faster. And so, I mean, obviously, cost is going to be a big factor of where is there significant resource potential, where cost savings are there to be had. But I wouldn't point to one single state in the map and say this is where we should go next. This is really about making sure that these opportunities are available everywhere. And that's about getting the market structures in place that enable that.
Thank you, Bryn. And I guess I would ask Dominic and Danielle, do we have time for one more question?
Sure, yeah, we can do one more.
Okay, so last question is, are Microsoft and Google participating in the New England pool pathway discussions for reforming capacity markets? And oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Commissioner Randall. We are we're not as engaged in that market, so we've had less of an engagement there, but would welcome a follow-up question on it. Might be something we're engaged in other areas. Jeff, I didn't mean to talk over you. I sounded like I talked over someone. Oh, sorry.
No, same response from me. We don't have load in that region sufficient enough to warrant engagement, but I'll just say that we absolutely believe that, you know, organized power markets are good, especially when they're organized and governed appropriately. So, but no, we're not currently engaged just because we don't have a business need to be.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for your presentations and for answering questions and for the very this pathways analysis and moving forward. We're on the brink here of changes to how we go forward with renewable and clean energy. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dominic and Danielle, and thank you very much, all of you, for your participation today and for those listening in.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Rendell. Thank you to all of our panelists. That was a great webinar, and we love having these. Please come back, all of you that attended, and please come back in January for our next one. It is up on the screen. You can register at our website, the www.naruc.org/CPI, and then go to our Innovations webinar page, and that you'll find it there. All right, thank you so much, and I hope all of you have a good rest of your day.